Welcome back to another episode of the Bleav in Tigers podcast. I am your host, RJ Schafer, coming to you after the third game in the Anaheim series in what's kind of felt like a disappointment. The last time we came to you, we were talking about this being what should be an easy series. And we know that the Tigers have struggled playing away against the Angels in the past years. Like, that is something that is undeniably true. Jake Rogers is probably the only person who has not struggled. But that still holds true because this Angels team is not amazing. Okay, and I'll be frank with you, the Tigers should not be down 3-0 in this series. Like, this Angels team is not strong enough to where that would be viable. Like, there are some series where the Tigers have gotten swept or they've struggled, and I've accepted the fact that, okay, this is a team that is a lot better than the Tigers and a team that is actually going somewhere, probably going to be in the playoffs, probably going to be in the wild card, something among those lines, in where I can accept that. But I kind of want to talk today about the expectations of the Tigers and what this team is supposed to be just has not came true at all. And one of the main talking points I want to talk about is extra innings has been a struggle recently, and a lot of that has to do with the strategy that we bring into extra innings. Like, we rarely ever bunt, and you see other teams bunt, and you're like, wow, this works so well. And the Tigers rarely ever do that in extra innings. I mean, we're 1-4 in the last 5 extra inning games. And we have talked extensively on this podcast. Me and Connor Marecki, most notably, have talked about how AJ Hinch really does not like to bunt. Under any kind of situation, is not a fan of bunting. And these kind of like clutch moments where you need a hit, it just hasn't happened. And I think it's fair to say this offense is not going to be your most reliable offense in the MLB. They're not even close. Okay, because you're gonna have a night where you let a guy go 6 innings deep on a no hitter, and there are gonna be nights where you do struggle as an offense, and I do accept that. Like, not all offenses are gonna be perfect, but it seems like in clutch moments this year is kind of when the Tigers have struggled, and just kind of not lived up to the expectations of what this team was supposed to be. This was supposed to be kind of the developmental year, right? This was supposed to be a year when you get a lot of guys into the MLB, maybe give them more playing time than they deserve, and let them figure the things that they need to figure out at the major league level. Like, this is supposed to be the Colt Keith developmental year. Like, that was the main storyline heading into the year is, okay, you have a guy who you signed to a humongous contract. If it doesn't work out, you're eating a ton of money. So you're going to want to use this year to develop him as a hitter. But the development of these hitters has not really happened. And maybe this is something that we need to ask Hinch about, maybe ask Harris about. We have supposed to have been developing these hitters, and that has simply and purely not happened. Like, at all. You look at guys like Green and Carp, okay, and they have been good, but they have not been the level that you have expected them to be. Green was supposed to be, very good all-star level hitter, and I think he is. I think he is an all-star level hitter, but he hasn't gotten those votes. Um, and Carp is a guy that has a lot of people seeing him as kind of a platoon guy, and he hasn't played in a while, so I guess it's kind of unfair to bring him up in this situation. But we are seeing guys regressing. Okay, not guys that are old, not guys that are way past their prime. Guys who have been hitting good, and maybe they were hitting good this year, maybe they were hitting in the last year, and they are not hitting good this year. That's a problem. And I don't think this has been addressed anywhere. I don't think Hinch or Harris has said anything about this. I mean, because they probably shouldn't, right? This is your main corporate struggle that you're going to address quietly. But we haven't made a move for any bats. We haven't signed anybody. We haven't given anybody a chance besides Drew Maggie, but he's just depth at the AAA level. Like, that's all he is. It seems like the Tigers do not care to develop their hitters, and they're more of in a position of being a place where pitchers can go and where players can get better defensively, which also has not really been the case. I mean, you've been an average defensive team. You haven't been bad, but there have been guys who have supposed to have been amazing on the defensive end, and they just haven't been that. So it's very frustrating as a Tigers fan because I think you noticed with the offense especially that the offense comes in innings, right? You have your occasional 11-run, 13-run game. I'm not going to count those in that situation because those are outliers, right? Like, the Tigers rarely score 6 runs in a game. Like, and I bet we can find a stat on this later, which will probably be in the description. If not, please send us something in the comments, because it seems like we either score 10, 9 plus, or 4 or less. It's never really in the middle, which is not what you want as an offense. You kind of want consistency, which is kind of what the Tigers have struggled with in a lot of areas. But it just seems like the offense comes in hot innings, and there were some of those today. Like, there was the first inning, and I think you need to get a lot more out of that for the Tigers. You have Mark Canha popping up, and then you do have the RBI to get the Tigers their first run. But when you have bases loaded, no outs, you're kind of expected to score at least 1 run, maybe more. And that's another area where the Tigers have struggled on offense. The offense did start kicking later in the game. Like, you got 2 runs off of sac hits in the 4th. Like, you grounded into a force out, which could have been a double play. It was not. And then Jake Rogers, the hit after, got a sacrifice fly, to bring Zach McKinstry in. And you felt good about the offense at that point because you were scoring a decent amount. 3 runs in 4 innings is not anything to snap at. Like, that's a good offense. And you obviously had the Jake Rogers. You had the Jake Rogers bomb in the 6th. And I've been hearing a lot of Tigers fans talk about, breaking up this catching duo. I don't think that's plausible. I think Jake Rogers is getting back on track. I think he's getting back to the Jake Rogers that we want to see. Consistent home runs, consistent production from the offensive end, and still bringing that insane defensive value that he has. And I think that's something that is undeniable, and you will never lose in Jake Rogers. Jake Rogers will never regress into a bad defensive catcher. I'm saying that now, and that will forever hold true. Jake Rogers is amazing behind the dish. The framing will always be there. And maybe as time goes on, the pop time isn't what it used to be, but very, very small objective things are the only ways that he can regress as a catcher. I think he's very solid. And this is another game where he's back. He's back to what we like seeing out of Jake Rogers. Jake Rogers is not a player that hits for batting average. He's a player that hits for home runs. And this year, less than last year, has that been true? Okay, and a lot of Tigers fans have struggled with the fact that he hasn't been the man that you want him to be behind the plate. But a game like this is so promising. You have the deep fly, which ended up being a sacrifice fly, and then you have the home run, which is actually the longest home run of his career, 445 feet. And granted, it is in L.A. Also, he is a demon in L.A. and has like a 1,300 OPS and over a 400 batting average. The Angels might trade for him just based on that fact, because he has absolutely tore up the Angels at Angel Stadium in the past years. And it's always fun to watch because there's this certain discourse that happens before Tigers fans or before the Tigers play in LA. Tigers fans kind of have this discourse as like, Jake Rogers is going to be Barry Bonds for a week, and then we're back. But I think this Tigers team, despite the loss, because this is always going to hurt, right? Losing in extra innings is never fun, and you're always going to have this conversation of, okay, what could we have done more? Because you play the normal game and you, quote unquote, tied through regulation, and you had to go into quote unquote overtime, right? So you know that you're given an equal chance. It's like starting a brand new game, and that's what I like to stress to people a lot is losing in extra innings does not mean you were not competitive during the game. A lot of people are like, oh, we lose by 3 in extra innings, the game must have not been competitive. No, the whole point of extra innings is, wow, you guys were so equally matched throughout the game that we need to play another one. And I don't know. I tend to be very optimistic when it comes to losses. It's getting hard. I will say that. Losing 3 in a row in LA to a team that has not been great, and we are now gifting their first winning month of the season. They might actually pass the Tigers in record. If we lose tomorrow with Mize on the bump, the Angels will have a better record than the Tigers. And we were talking about into the beginning of this series how the Angels were a significantly lower record than the Tigers are. So it's just another thing that you it hurts to see as fans, and I imagine hurts to see as players, anybody involved with the team. But one thing you can always count on is Reese Olson. And the term that I used in the caption was a diamond under pressure. He got into a lot of trouble early, right? Again, not going to hide that. He had the wild pitch that scored a run, and there was that RBI ground out. Maybe that was a sack. I believe that was just a ground out. And Luis Senhifo scored, who has been amazing and has continued to be amazing throughout the season. But one thing I like about Reese Olson is when he gets under pressure, when he gives up runs, when he has a lot of guys on base, when he is in situations which he should not be in, Reese Olson has been, quote unquote, a diamond under pressure. He has found ways to not let it affect him at all, have guys on the base paths, have runs scored against you, and not affect you, right? This was looking to be not a very solid start, right? He started off, you gave up those 2 runs early, you have that wild pitch, and you start to think, this can't be that good of a game. But it was for Reese Olson, and I will say this was an insanely solid start. And he seems so good with managing damage. And that's what I love so much about Reese Olson. And that's what I think makes Reese Olson such a valuable pitcher if you're the Tigers. And I think a lot of people underestimate that because maybe the numbers aren't where Flaherty and Skubal are, right? Because Flaherty has one of the best K to walk ratios in the league, and he has been amazing deeply analytically besides the fact that he gives up, a decent amount of home runs. That's the only gripe you can have with Jack Flaherty right now. But I really want to put Reese Olson in that same category because Reese Olson, and I want to stress that this is what playoff teams look for. You can be an amazing pitcher, but under pressure, you're not the same guy. In playoff situations, in important games down the stretch, you are not the same pitcher that you were during the season. Having a 2, having a 3 ERA, anywhere in that range throughout the season doesn't matter if you can't do that in October. And I think what is so valuable about a guy like Reese Olson, nothing can affect this man. And he is doing it at such a young age as well. Like I believe, and I'm not 100% sure on this, and I know Reese Olson is a young guy, he might be the youngest in this rotation. I believe Reese Olson is 24. Yes, Reese Olson is 24. And he is so good at navigating under pressure. And maybe this is, the Bleav in Reese Olson podcast. Because, Reese Olson is just a guy I love talking about, right? Because there's a lot of things to smile about in this Tigers, pitching rotation. And Reese Olson is one of them. He is completely amazing under pressure. And if you are a Tigers fan, please do not take this for granted, because this is a guy any team will want in October. And he's definitely not moving at the deadline. We're having Reese Olson for a very long time, and I'm very happy about that. There are other things I'm happy about too. Everybody ate today. I will say that. The offense, with the exception of Green and with the exception of Canna and McKinstry, actually, I'm not going to exclude those guys. Canna got on base. McKinstry got an RBI. Green got on base. He did strike out twice, though, so whoever had him and picked the stick, I wasn't watching. It's an unfortunate day for you, whoever picked Riley Green. But everybody ate. Malloy got a hit, which was great. Jake Rogers had an amazing game. Keith got a hit and an RBI. Urshela had a hit. And Wencio Perez had 2 hits. It's good to see games like this, okay? And I think a lot of guys are going to say, your offense didn't produce enough in this game. And when your offense did produce, it wasn't serious enough. I don't think that's true. I think the ceiling of this Tigers offense, and I'm going to be honest, I think it is games like this, right? And five runs is not anything to sneeze at. 5 runs a game will make you a very, very, very amazing, baseball offense. Like this is not a lackluster offense, and we're not going to pretend like that's true at all. This is not a hate in Tigers podcast. It is a Bleav in Tigers podcast. And games like this are amazing as fans, because you have something to build on. And that has been something where the Tigers have struggled. We have talked about the Tigers' struggles so much on this podcast. So much on this podcast has it been, the offense's recent struggles. But this is a game where you go in, and granted, I will say you're not facing amazing pitching. Like Griffin Canning has had an average year, and you do get shut out in the bullpen after that. But seeing guys get on base that we haven't seen get on base, and seeing guys get hits that we haven't seen get hits recently, it's just enticing. And I think this is the only thing where I will, I guess, throw shade at Hinch. I'm not sure, and maybe this is just an observation from a fan point of view, and maybe it would be different if I was in the clubhouse. But not a lot of times do you see Tigers, super fired up. I mixed up fired and riled. I bet you guys could decode the difference, but very rarely will you see a very, very, very energetic Tigers team. And that's where I think you miss guys like Leland, where guys were fired up all the time. Okay, let's just put it simply. Jim Leland was a guy to let all of his emotion out, and I think Hinch is good, and I think he's good for a guy like Olson, where we talked about, they're very good under pressure, right? And they're very calm individuals. But that always, that can't be good in every single scenario, right? And he is a guy who has success, and I absolutely respect Hinch. Would love a conversation with that guy. He is a great manager. But, it just seems like Tigers hitters aren't always fired up. But a game where everybody eats, naturally, everybody's going to feel a lot better about how their game played. Okay? And just being able to see that from a fan's perspective, from, if you're in Scott Harris's perspective, that's nice, because that the offense can be motivated. And I think the Tigers are in a very motivated place right now, because, you have a guy like Flaherty who's on a 1-year deal, and I kind of want to get into this. There was an article out by the Detroit News, Chris McCoskey, which stated that the Tigers might actually be buyers at the deadline, which seems insane in the current position that we are talking about. But the Tigers may be looking to keep Jack Flaherty, which sounds crazy, and I know it sounds crazy, but when you actually dig deeper into it, it makes a lot more sense. Okay, the Tigers kind of control their own destiny. Okay, you play the Guardians 10 times, you play the Twins 6 times. You can put yourself in a position to be in a race for the division. And that's not outrageous to say. So I think if you are in Scott Harris's position, you could be looking to buy at the deadline. And Jack Flaherty is a guy who, has been pushed as this, big trade deadline guy. But if you can keep a guy like Flaherty at the deadline, a guy who has been so great in striking hitters out, a guy that's been so great in limiting walks, a guy where you only have one gripe in his game. Other than that, he's been almost a perfect pitcher for the Tigers. That Flaherty and Skubal 1-2 punch is the best the Tigers have seen in a long time. Like this is reminiscent of Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer. People are gonna say I'm crazy. I might be a little bit crazy. I love these Tigers, and I know Flaherty. Probably the main purpose of him coming here was, okay, I want to get better, and I want to go to a team that can contend at the deadline, and maybe that is something that may happen. Like it seemed like a foregone conclusion, but after this, this kind of makes sense because the Tigers have plenty of opportunities to cut, into the deficit that they've made for themselves in the AL Central, and can make room in the wild card race. I mean, Minnesota is second out of 3 spots right now, and they're 8 games ahead as of yesterday. So I think they're 8.5 ahead now. But you give yourself a very interesting situation heading into the deadline. And if you do trade Flaherty, as mentioned in this article, Beau Brieske is actually the biggest possible replacement to replace Flaherty. It was supposed to be Matt Manning in the beginning of the season. Matt Manning was supposed to be, and he was at the beginning of the season. I will say that. Like, he was the guy that would come up for every single doubleheader. Now you're kind of looking at Keider Montero, and you're looking at a lot of other options. He has struggled in Toledo, frankly. The ERA is around 6. He is not what he used to be. I'll put it like that. And he will forever be remembered in Tigers history. That no-hitter is nothing to sneeze at, man. That was such a fun game to watch. I mean, you have another guy like Alex Lang, who is he just got placed actually on the full season minor league IL, so he will not return this season. But I mean, 2 guys who will be remembered in Tigers history for forever, and I'm kind of interested to see Beau Brieske, back in the starting role. But it's very possible that does not happen, and Flaherty is still in the rotation, and Tigers are buyers at the deadline. I mean, there's been a lot of good news for the Tigers, really, because we just heard from the Baez camp. He has felt, quote unquote, the best he's felt in some time, which may kind of ensue the fact that maybe this injury has been affecting him for a lot longer than we know. And maybe that has been where the struggles have came from for Baez. And maybe after this rehab assignment, Baez is a lot different player than earlier in this season. And I think that's something that's fun to think about as a Tigers fan, because there had been kind of assumptions. There have been rumors floating around for a long time that maybe Baez is dealing with something a lot bigger that we don't know about. And now that he's addressing this back issue, and now he's having time to recover, having time in rehab, maybe he turns into a different hitter. right? The fielding was always going to be there with Baez. That was never a question. Okay, and the error numbers are always higher, but that's always going to be more inflated because he can just get to more balls. That's just how it is. Okay, that you're gonna make more errors when you can get to more balls, and that's it. Baez is an amazing fielder. You cannot change my mind on that. We are never going to have that conversation. But seeing this is great news, right? He is the best he has felt in a long time. Not in a long time. And some time was what was used. But I think it's fair to assume that it's been a decent amount of time. And I think there's a lot of things to look forward to as a Tigers fan right now. And I know we are in the depths of this losing streak. We are 4 games deep. 1 game away from a sweep or 1 game away from a 1-3 series. And it looks bleak. And I do accept that. It looks bleak as a Tigers fan, but there is so much to look forward to. Absolutely so much to look forward to. And if you look forward to listening to this podcast, you should give a subscribe. You should give a follow. You should give a download, a bookmark. Whatever it is and whatever platform you're on. We here at Bleav in Tigers, me, all of the crew, we appreciate it very much, and we love hearing your feedback. And if you want to be as optimistic as me, you can drop a comment or let me know in the comment section if I'm being a little bit too crazy, a little bit too optimistic. I'm never going to tone it down. This Tigers team is so much better than the record says, and I will forever die on that hill. The pitching is amazing. The offense is getting there. And I am very, very, very confident that the Tigers' winning percentage at the end of the year will be a lot higher than it is right now. I might eat my words later. Please quote this if you're a division rival. Don't really care, actually. You can pull up the evidence later. This was your most recent episode of Bleav in Tigers. As always, I was your host, RJ Schafer. If you were tuning in with us, feel free to give us a review. Tell us how we're doing. And, we will see you tomorrow.